The check was beautiful, actually. Dorothy Sullivan had always had neat handwriting, the kind of handwriting that comes from years of charting patient notes at 3 in the morning when your hands are tired, but your brain knows that a misplaced decimal could kill someone. Every letter sat upright and deliberate. Every number was unambiguous. Pay to the order of Magnolia Grand Venue and Events. Amount $50,000. Memo. Sullivan Wedding. Full payment and deposit. She had written it 2 months ago, sitting at her kitchen table on a Sunday morning with a second cup of coffee going cold beside her, wearing the same oversized flannel shirt she'd been wearing on Sunday mornings for 15 years. The shirt had belonged to Frank. It still smelled like him sometimes, or maybe that was just her wanting it to. She had looked at the check before sealing it in the envelope and thought, this is it. This is what 7 years of setting aside $200 a month looks like. This is Saturn's rings. She smiled at that thought. Brooke wouldn't have remembered that night. She'd been 14, exhausted, frustrated, covered in glitter glue. But Dorothy remembered. She always remembered. That was the thing nobody tells you about being a mother who does everything alone. You become the keeper of every memory, because you're the only one left to keep them. Now, sitting in the break room of Mercy General Hospital on a Tuesday afternoon in September, eating lukewarm vegetable soup from a can because she hadn't had time to cook the night before, Dorothy Sullivan watched the check on her phone's banking app one last time. Then she watched the text message that had arrived 4 minutes ago. She read it once. She read it again. She set the phone face down on the table, very carefully, the way you set down something you're afraid you might throw if you're not deliberate about it. She picked up her plastic spoon. She put it back down. Outside the break room window, the hospital parking lot was doing its ordinary Tuesday thing, an orderly wheeling an empty chair back toward the entrance, a woman in scrubs speed-walking to her car while talking on the phone, a man in a visitor's badge standing beside a sedan with his hands in his pockets just staring at nothing. The particular kind of nothing that means you've just received some news inside and you haven't sorted out what to do with your face yet. Dorothy understood that man. She picked up her phone, turned it over, read the message one more time, because some part of her brain was still insisting on the possibility of misinterpretation. From Brooke. Mom, I've been thinking a lot about this and talking it over with Tyler and his family. I think it's best if you don't attend the ceremony. Your presence would create an awkward dynamic we're not equipped to manage on the day. Please don't take this personally. We'll celebrate with you separately, something low-key. Tyler's family sends their regards. Dorothy sat with it. She was 58 years old. She had been a nurse for 30 years. She had held the hands of people who were dying, people who were getting the worst news of their lives, people who had just lost children and didn't know what sounds were appropriate to make yet. She knew how to sit with hard things. She had been trained by life to absorb impact without going under, but this was something different. This was 735 square feet of ballroom, 12 centerpieces of fresh lavender, because Brooke had said lavender, always lavender, since she was 11 years old, a string quartet, a catered dinner for 140 people, a photographer who had been booked for 14 months. This was every double shift she'd picked up without complaint, every vacation she hadn't taken, every pair of shoes she'd kept wearing past the point of reasonable comfort because her feet weren't where the money needed to go. This was the moment she understood, fully and without any remaining room for gentler interpretations, that she had been removed from her daughter's life the way you remove a piece of furniture that doesn't fit the new decor. Please don't take this personally. She noticed something, with the clinical detachment of a woman who had spent 30 years observing humans in their worst and most revealing moments. The phrase Tyler's family sends their regards did not sound like Brooke. Brooke said totally and honestly, and no, yeah, for real. Brooke did not say sends their regards. That phrase had been put there by someone else. Dorothy put the phone in her pocket. She finished 3 more spoonfuls of soup. Then she picked the phone back up and called Robert Pemberton. To understand what happened next, you have to understand who Dorothy Sullivan was before she became the woman sitting in that break room. She grew up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, second of 5 kids, daughter of a coal miner named Raymond and a first-grade teacher named Eileen. Their house had 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that always smelled like something was on the stove, and a front porch that Eileen had put 2 rocking chairs on with the specific intention of sitting in them at the end of every day, regardless of what the day had done to her. The porch is non-negotiable, Eileen used to say. Everything else can wait. Dorothy inherited that. the ability to find the one unchangeable thing in any given chaos and plant your feet there. She met Frank Sullivan when she was 22 at a community dance at the St. Anthony's Parish Hall that she'd only gone to because her friend Karen had begged her and promised to buy her onion rings after. Frank was an electrician from the East Side, broad-shouldered, with a laugh that started somewhere low in his chest before it decided to become a sound. He knew exactly one country song, "Take Me Home, Country Roads," and he could not sing it well. He sang it anyway, every single time, like a man who had made peace with his limitations and found them acceptable. They married 2 years later. Brooke arrived when Dorothy was 30, Jake when she was 33. Those years, the years when Frank was alive and the house had 4 people in it, Dorothy doesn't talk about often because they were so ordinary and so full that any description of them feels inadequate. There was a garden in the backyard that Frank was always threatening to expand. There were movie nights where they ate popcorn on the couch, and Frank fell asleep before the 3rd act every single time, and Brooke would announce this like breaking news. "Dad's out, he's gone, it's over for him." And Jake would throw popcorn at him. There were Sunday mornings. Frank had a navy blue flannel shirt with a left chest pocket, and every weekend he wore it. Into that pocket he tucked a black Sharpie and a small notepad, because Frank Sullivan was a man who wrote things down. Things he wanted to remember, things he wanted to do, grocery items, ideas for the garden, song lyrics he'd misheard and found funnier than the original. After Frank died, Dorothy found the shirt in the back of the closet, folded the way he always folded things, precise, like someone had shown him once and he'd never seen a reason to do it differently. She reached into the left chest pocket. There was one notepad sheet inside. 3 words. Dot loves lavender. He'd been planning to plant a lavender border along the back fence. He'd written it down so he wouldn't forget to pick up starts at the nursery. He never made it to the nursery. Dorothy still has the notepad sheet. It lives in the inside pocket of her winter coat, the good one she wears to anything that matters. He was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer when Dorothy was 40. 19 months later, on a cold November morning, he was gone. Brooke was 14. Jake was 11. Dorothy did not allow herself to fall apart, which is both the most heroic and the most quietly destructive decision a person can make. She got up every morning because Brooke and Jake needed someone to get up every morning. She filed the paperwork. She called the insurance company 43 times over 7 months. She met with Robert Pemberton to sort out what was owed and what was left and what the plan was going to be. The plan, as it turned out, required 3 jobs: daytime nursing at Mercy General, weekend evening shifts at a private clinic in the suburbs. And every night, after Brooke and Jake were in bed, she opened her laptop at the kitchen table and did bookkeeping for 3 small businesses in the neighborhood: a laundromat, a bakery, a hardware store. Their owners paid her in cash and gratitude, and both were useful. She slept 4 to 5 hours a night for 6 years. She never told Brooke and Jake how tired she was. She never put the weight of it on them. Her mother Eileen had taught her, children are not luggage handlers for adult grief. You feel what you feel. You feel it quietly, or you feel it with someone your own age who can carry their share. You do not hand it down. Jake, for his part, had always understood more than Dorothy gave him credit for. He was 25 now, in his 3rd year of medical school, and there had always been something in him that watched out for his mother with a quiet steadiness that reminded Dorothy of Frank. He called every Sunday without fail, not just to check in, but to actually talk. He noticed things. When Dorothy mentioned offhandedly once that she'd skipped lunch 3 days in a row, he'd shown up at the hospital on his day off with a bag of sandwiches and sat with her in the parking lot without making a big deal of it. That was Jake. He never made a big deal of things. He just showed up. The moment that lives most clearly in Dorothy's memory from those hard early years isn't a dramatic one. It doesn't announce itself as significant. It's just a Tuesday night in October, Brooke at the kitchen table, science project in ruins, glitter glue everywhere, that particular face a 14-year-old makes when they're about to cry but are trying very hard not to because they feel too old for it. Dorothy had just come through the door from the evening clinic. She was still in her work shoes. Her lower back was doing that thing where it had stopped talking and started screaming. Brooke looked up at her. "Mom, I can't make Saturn's rings." Dorothy looked at the table. Cardboard, wire, colored paper, a hot glue gun that had clearly been involved in some kind of disaster, an instruction sheet that had something spilled on it. She set down her bag. She took off her coat. She did not say, "Brooke, it's 10:30. She did not say, I've been on my feet for 10 hours. She pulled out the chair across from her daughter and said, "Okay, walk me through what we've got." They worked until 3:30 in the morning. Dorothy went into her nursing shift at 6. She did not sleep, but she had memorized the particular way Brooke's face looked when the rings finally held, the wire holding, the painted rings catching the kitchen light at just the right angle. And that face was worth every minute. Brooke graduated college without a single dollar of student debt. Dorothy had made sure of that the same way she'd made sure of everything, systematically, quietly, without making Brooke feel like a burden. She had opened a college savings account, a 529, the kind specifically designed to lock your money away for education and one purpose only, when Brooke was 3 years old, and added to it with the same consistency she brought to everything. Brooke went to school for communications. She graduated, moved to Philadelphia, talked her way into a marketing coordinator role at a mid-size real estate firm within 2 months of graduation. She was sharp, driven, charming in the way of someone who'd learned early that you have to earn the room, not assume it. She called her mother every Sunday. She visited at Thanksgiving and Christmas and random Saturdays when she felt like it. She sent Jake memes without context at 11 p.m., and Jake sent them back with commentary. She had mentioned Ashley Tanner in nearly every phone call since freshman year of college, her closest friend, the one she called first whenever anything important happened, the one who had talked her through every crisis from failed exams to failed relationships with the particular loyalty of someone who had decided long ago that Brooke Sullivan was worth showing up for. She was, by any measure Dorothy could apply, doing great. Then she met Tyler Hargrove. It was a networking event, real estate and finance, those worlds overlapping at a hotel ballroom in downtown Philadelphia. Tyler was the kind of handsome that comes with regular haircuts and a gym membership and the knowledge that you have both. He worked in financial consulting. He shook hands with the confidence of someone who had never been unsure whether he belonged in a room. Brooke told Dorothy about him on a Sunday call 2 weeks after they met. "He's different, Mom," she said. And Dorothy, who had been a nurse for 30 years and therefore had a finely calibrated sensor for the phrase, "he's different," said, "Different how, baby?" Like, he just moves through things easily, you know? Like nothing is a problem. Everything is just manageable. Dorothy thought, that is either the description of a very grounded person or a very privileged one, and those two things are not the same. She kept the thought to herself. 6 months in, Brooks brought Tyler to Scranton for a weekend. He was polite, attentive, said ma'am at the right times. He helped clear the table after dinner without being asked, which Dorothy acknowledged as a point in his favor. He laughed at Jake's jokes, which was either genuine or very well performed. She was willing to wait and see. Then she met Patricia Hargrove. The dinner was at the Hargroves' home in Villanova, a 6-bedroom house in a neighborhood where the houses had names for themselves in the way that only old money or very determined new money tends to allow. The driveway was long. The front door was heavy. There were fresh flowers in the entryway that were not from a grocery store. Patricia Hargrove came down the stairs the way certain women descend stairs, like the stairs were built for the purpose of being descended upon. She was 62, trim, silver-haired, wearing a blouse that was either silk or very good at pretending to be. She had the posture of someone who had been told since childhood that slouching was a character flaw. She took Dorothy's hand with both of hers, the warm double handshake, the one that feels like welcome and manages somehow to feel like assessment at the same time. "Dorothy, what a lovely name. Brooke has told us so much about you." "All good things, I hope," Dorothy said, which was the thing people say. "Of course," Patricia smiled. "Brooke tells us you work in healthcare? I've always had such deep respect for people in service." There it was, service, not medicine, not healthcare, service. The word you use when you want to put someone on the other side of a counter. Dorothy smiled. "I've been an RN for 30 years, mostly critical care." "How wonderful," Patricia said, and moved on. Across the room, Dorothy caught Gerald Hargrove's eye. He was a tall man with the look of someone who had been told to stand up straight for so long that standing up straight had become its own kind of exhaustion. He gave her a nod that was somehow, despite saying nothing, apologetic. At dinner, Patricia steered the conversation with the skill of someone who had been doing it for decades, asking questions that were shaped like interest but functioned like sorting mechanisms. "What part of Scranton? What did your parents do? Oh, a coal miner? How remarkable. That kind of work ethic really does skip generations sometimes, doesn't it? every sentence smooth as a river stone, every sentence leaving a small mark. On the drive back, Dorothy said nothing for a long time. Then, "That woman is going to be a problem." Brooke. "Mom, she was perfectly nice." Dorothy. "She was perfectly polite. Those are different things." Brooke sighed that particular sigh that means, "Please don't make me agree with you right now." Dorothy let it go. Brooke was happy. Tyler was. She couldn't find a real flaw in Tyler yet, just a vague sense that he had never in his life been told no by his mother, and had therefore never developed a self that could hold up under resistance. She let it go. She was good at that. Sometimes too good. The problem with letting things go is that some things don't go. They just go underground. Here is the thing about Patricia Hargrove. She did not do obvious things. She did not say Dorothy is beneath us. She did not make dramatic gestures. She didn't need to. She had, over what Dorothy would later understand to be a very deliberate 3-year campaign, done something far more effective. She asked questions. "Brooke, sweetheart, do you think your mother would be comfortable at the Whitmore Club dinner? I only ask because the dress code can be quite specific, and I'd hate for her to feel out of place." "I noticed Dorothy wore flats to the engagement party. That's perfectly fine, of course. I just want to make sure she has time to get something appropriate for the wedding before the schedule fills up." "Does your mother know much about wine pairings?" "No judgment at all. I simply want to make sure the sommelier knows to explain the menu in terms that work for everyone." Every question wrapped in the language of concern. Every question placing Dorothy one step outside the frame. Every question heard enough times, becoming its own kind of evidence. Brooke was a smart woman. Dorothy knew that. But Brooke was also a woman who had grown up without money, who had spent her whole adult life in rooms where she was figuring out the rules on the fly, who had found in Tyler and his world something she hadn't had access to before. Ease. Arrival. The feeling of being somewhere it's safe to stop proving yourself. Patricia knew exactly which door to push. Dorothy found out how wide it had been pushed by accident on a weeknight in February when she stopped by Brooke's apartment unannounced after a shift. She'd made chicken soup the night before. Frank's recipe. The one he'd always called medicine soup. The one that Dorothy made whenever someone in the family was sick or sad or just needed to remember that food made by someone who loves you tastes different than food made by anyone else. She used her spare key. She came in quietly. She genuinely does. But she genuinely does. But she just doesn't. She doesn't get how things are done, you know? Like she shows up to the engagement dinner in scrubs because she came straight from work, and I love her, but sometimes I'm so embarrassed. A pause. Brooke laughing softly at whatever Patricia said. "No, you're right. You're totally right. It's just easier if she's not involved in the planning. Less to manage." Dorothy stood in the kitchen. She set the container of soup on the counter without a sound. She stood there for a moment, long enough to understand what she was feeling and to decide not to act on it. Then she walked back out. She pulled the door shut behind her gently. She went to her car. She drove to a Walgreens parking lot 2 miles away and sat there and ate 3 spoonfuls of soup from the container without a spoon, with the car running, watching the parking lot lights make halos in the cold February fog. She did not tell anyone. Not Linda, not Jake, not Robert. She filed it away. She kept moving. 7 months passed the way hard months do. Not quickly, not slowly, but with the particular weight of things you've decided not to think about yet. Dorothy worked. She gardened. She called Brooke on Sundays and kept her voice level and did not mention the Walgreens parking lot or the soup she'd eaten cold and alone in the dark. She told herself she was being patient. She told herself Brooke would find her way back without being pushed. She was still telling herself that when, on a September afternoon, her phone rang. Unknown number, Pennsylvania prefix. "Miss Sullivan, this is Ashley Tanner. I'm Brooke's friend from college. I'm the maid of honor." "I know who you are, Ashley. Brooke's talked about you since freshman year." A breath. The kind that precedes something someone has been working up to. I don't know if I should be calling you. I've gone back and forth on it for like 2 weeks, but I think you need to know some things." Dorothy sat down on the back porch step. Around her, the September garden was winding down. The tomatoes done, the basil going to seed, the lavender along the back fence she'd planted years ago, dry and fragrant and fading. "Tell me," Dorothy said. Ashley told her. 3 years. A systematic, careful, relentless campaign. The questions shaped like concern, the suggestions disguised as help, the gradual redefinition of Dorothy Sullivan from Brooke's mother to Brooke's complication. How Patricia had 2 months before the wedding somehow gotten herself added to Magnolia Grand's contact list as the primary family liaison, meaning that for 2 months she'd been directing certain decisions about the wedding without Dorothy's knowledge. How she'd rearranged the seating chart to place Dorothy at table 12, the table for distant relatives and plus ones who didn't know the couple, the table where you put people you don't know what to do with. How she'd had Dorothy's name removed from the printed program under Mother of the Bride. Brooke didn't do all of this on her own, Ashley said. Her voice was careful. I want you to understand that. She's not evil, Ms. Sullivan. She's just been under a lot of pressure, and she's been hearing one voice louder than everyone else's for 3 years, and… Ashley. Yeah? I know my daughter. I know she's not evil. A pause. Tell me, whose name is on the Magnolia Grand contract? What? The contract. The booking. Who signed it? Ashley was quiet for a moment. I'm pretty sure it's you. You paid for it, so… Thank you, Ashley. Ms. Sullivan, what are you going to… Thank you for calling me. That took guts. I won't forget it. Dorothy ended the call. She sat on the porch step for another few minutes looking at the lavender. Then she went inside, opened her laptop, and looked up flights to Spain. She looked at the schedule for a flamenco school in Sevilla that her colleague Helen Russo had mentioned twice in the past month. Helen, who had retired early and spent a year traveling and come back looking like someone who had remembered something important about herself. She made a list of 3 phone numbers, a travel agency, Robert Pemberton, and Magnolia Grand Events. She did not make the calls that day. She went to bed and she slept 7 hours, the most she'd slept in months, because something in her body recognized that a decision had been made, and decisions, even hard ones, are restful in a way that indecision never is. 3 days later, the text message arrived, and Dorothy Sullivan, who had already said goodbye to the version of this story where she attended her daughter's wedding, made her phone calls in the order she had planned. Travel agency first, then Robert, then Sandra Whitfield at Magnolia Grand. It wasn't revenge. It was a refund on a love that was no longer mutual. Or so she told herself, sitting in that break room, soup gone cold, the Spain itinerary already sent to her email. The crying would come later. It would come hard, and it would be the kind of crying that has 20 years of practice behind it, and therefore comes out with some force. But that was for later. Right now, Dorothy Sullivan straightened her back, threw away the soup can, washed her hands at the break room sink, and walked back to the floor. There were patients who needed her. There were always patients who needed her. And she had always shown up. Robert Pemberton answered on the second ring, which was unusual. Robert was a man who let his phone ring 4 times on principle. Something about not wanting to seem available, which Dorothy had always found faintly ridiculous in a man whose entire job was being available. Dot, what's up? The Magnolia Grand contract. My name is the primary signatory. Correct? A beat. Robert had known Dorothy for 16 years. He recognized the register she was using, the flat, clipped efficiency of a woman who had already made a decision and was now in execution mode. Correct. You're the primary. Patricia Hargrove was added as a secondary contact 2 months ago, but she has 0 legal standing on the contract itself. Why? If I cancel today, what do I get back? Silence. Longer this time. Dot. Talk to me. What happened? I'll tell you the whole thing on Sunday. Right now I need numbers. She heard him pulling something up on his computer. Keys clicking. Robert muttering something under his breath that she chose not to decode. Okay. 45-day cancellation clause. You're at 42 days out. That puts you in the penalty window. You forfeit 20% of the venue contract. So out of the $50,000, you're looking at 40 back on that piece. But the catering contract is separate. You're past the 60-day clause on that one, so the $8,000 deposit is a full forfeit. Net of everything, you're getting back closer to $32,000, Dot. And I'm out 18. Roughly, yeah. Dot. That's fine. That's… Dot. That's $18,000. Robert. Her voice was quiet. Not angry, just finished. She texted me and told me not to come to my daughter's wedding because I'd ruin the aesthetic. That's a direct quote. I need you to tell me, whose name is on those contracts? Robert was silent for a long moment. Then, I'll pull the cancellation forms now. Call Sandra Whitfield and I'll have everything processed by end of day. Thank you. And Dot, yeah, I'm sorry. That's not okay, what they did. No, Dorothy said. It really isn't. She called Sandra Whitfield next. Sandra Whitfield has the practiced warmth of someone who handled other people's wedding disasters for a living and had developed through sheer volume of exposure an almost supernatural calm about it. Magnolia Grand Events. This is Sandra. Sandra, this is Dorothy Sullivan. I'm the primary account holder for the Sullivan-Hargrove wedding, October 14th. Miss Sullivan, yes, of course. How can I need to cancel the reservation. All of it. The ballroom, the catering arrangements through your preferred vendor list, the string quartet booking, everything under my name. The pause was brief. Sandra was a professional. I see, Miss Sullivan, I want to make sure you have all the information before we proceed. At 42 days out, the cancellation policy. I've spoken with my attorney. I understand the terms. I'd like to proceed. Of course. A beat. Then, carefully. Can I ask, is there anything we can do to help resolve whatever's... Sandra, Dorothy's voice wasn't unkind. Patricia Hargrove is going to call you. Probably today, maybe tomorrow. When she does, you don't need to tell her it was me who canceled. You just need to confirm that there's no active reservation under the Sullivan name. Can you do that? A very small silence. Then, I can confirm whatever is factually accurate, Ms. Sullivan. That's all I'm asking. The last call she made before her shift ended was to a travel agency 2 blocks from her house that she'd driven past 1,000 times and never walked into. A young man named David answered and was, within 4 minutes, more enthusiastic about Dorothy's potential trip to Spain than anyone had been about anything in Dorothy's life for quite some time. She found it steadying somehow. His uncomplicated excitement about Sevilla. His genuine distress that all the best flamenco schools were booking up for October. Wait, hold on. I'm checking the Escuela Carmen de Torres. Typing sounds. Okay, yes. They have a 2-week intensive starting October 9th. That's actually perfect timing. You want me to pencil that? Book it, Dorothy said. Flights too? Flights too. She could hear David smiling through the phone. Ms. Sullivan, can I just say, this is going to be amazing. Have you ever done flamenco before? No, she said. That's totally fine. They take all levels. Good, she said. Because I'm starting from nothing. She thought, hanging up, that there was something very true about that sentence that went beyond flamenco lessons. Dorothy called Linda Kowalski from the hospital parking lot at 7:15, engine running, the September dark coming in fast around the car. Linda answered with, You left 20 minutes ago and you're calling me already? What'd you do? I canceled Brooke's wedding. Silence. Like the venue, the catering, the quartet, all of it? Dot. She texted me, Linda. Told me not to come because I'd mess up the... I heard you, honey. Linda's voice shifted. That gear change from banter to real that happened when she understood she was in a different kind of conversation now. Tell me everything. So Dorothy did. She sat in that parking lot with the engine running and she told Linda all of it. The text, Robert, Sandra, Ashley's call from 3 days ago, the conversation she'd overheard in Brooke's apartment back in February, the thing she'd never told anyone. When she finished, Linda was quiet for a while. Why didn't you tell me about February? Because saying it out loud makes it real. Dot. I know. She said she was embarrassed by you. She said she was embarrassed. I don't know if it was really about me or about... Linda, Patricia Hargrove has been working on that girl for 3 years. I'm not sure Brooke knows which thoughts are hers anymore. That doesn't make it okay. No, it doesn't. Linda exhaled slowly. So what happens now? Now I go home and I figure out what I'm going to say when Brooke calls. She's going to lose her mind, Dot. You know that. Yep. Patricia Hargrove is going to lose her mind even harder. Yep. And you're good? Dorothy looked out through the windshield at the parking lot lights doing their halo thing in the cold air. She thought about the notepad sheet in her coat pocket. Dot loves lavender. I booked Spain, she said. Another silence. Then Linda laughed. A real one, the kind that starts as disbelief and ends as something close to joy. You did what? 2 weeks in Sevilla. Flamenco lessons. Leaving October 9th. 5 days before the wedding. Yeah, Dorothy Ann Sullivan. Don't. I'm not saying anything, I'm just... Linda was still laughing, softer now. Honey, how long has it been since you did something just for you? Dorothy thought about it seriously, the way Linda deserved. I bought a coat, she finally said, in 2021. A coat doesn't count. It was a really good coat. Dot. I know, Linda. A beat. I know. The call from Robert Pemberton came 2 days later, on a Thursday morning, while Dorothy was making coffee. Dot, I need to tell you something, and I want to be up front. I wasn't looking for this. It came up through the cancellation paperwork process. She poured her coffee. Go ahead. When I contacted the catering company to process the cancellation, the coordinator mentioned, kind of offhandedly, that someone from the Hargrove family had reached out about 6 weeks ago asking about payment deferral options. Said they were waiting on some funds to clear. Dorothy set down her mug. I got curious, Robert said. I did some checking. Just public records, nothing invasive. Dot, the Hargrove house in Villanova has a second mortgage on it. Taken out 14 months ago. Tyler Hargrove has significant credit card debt. I'm talking close to $90,000. Gerald Hargrove liquidated his stake in his former business partnership 18 months ago. Dorothy stood in her kitchen and looked at the window above the sink, at the garden visible through it, at the lavender along the back fence. They don't have money, she said. Not the way Brooke thinks they do. The house is real, the history is real, but the current financial picture is... Dot. They needed this wedding to happen, and they needed someone else to pay for it. Dorothy stood very still for a moment. She thought about Patricia at that first dinner. How wonderful, people in service. The assessment behind the warmth, the calculation behind the smile. And then, slowly, she thought it all the way through. Patricia needed me in the room long enough to sign the check, she said, and out of the room for everything else. That's one way to read it. It's the only way that makes everything make sense. She picked up her coffee again. Her hand was very steady. The seating chart, removing my name from the program, the text. She wasn't just dismissing me, Robert. She was done needing me. Robert was quiet. She played my daughter, Dorothy said. Not with heat, with the particular cold clarity that comes after heat has burned itself out. She spent 3 years making Brooke ashamed of me so that Brooke would go along with cutting me out. Because if Brooke treated me like the mother of the bride, I'd be in those rooms. I'd ask questions. I'd notice things. You would have figured out the financial situation, Robert said. Probably. And then there'd be no wedding. Dot. Brooke doesn't know any of this. I know. So what do you want to do? Dorothy thought about it. She thought about Brooke at 14, Saturn's rings, the medicine soup. She thought about a woman who had spent 3 years being slowly, politely, expertly separated from the part of herself that knew who her mother was. Nothing, she said. Not yet. The truth has a way of coming out on its own. I don't need to push it. She paused. Besides, I'll be in Sevilla. Patricia found out on a Friday afternoon. She called Magnolia Grand to discuss the lighting arrangement for the cocktail hour, a detail she had apparently been managing for weeks without Dorothy's knowledge. Sandra Whitfield, true to her word, confirmed only what was factually accurate. There was no active reservation under the Sullivan name. Patricia called Tyler. Tyler called Brooke. Brooke called Dorothy. Dorothy was folding laundry. Mom! Brooke's voice was the kind of controlled that means the opposite of controlled. What did you do? I canceled the contracts. Mom, that's $50,000? It's my $50,000, Brooke. My name on the check, my name on the contracts. Legally straightforward. That's not... You can't just... A breath. The wedding is in 6 weeks. 6 weeks, Mom. Do you understand what you just... Brooke. Dorothy set down the shirt she was folding. She sat on the edge of the bed. I want to read you something. Mom, this is not the time. It'll take 10 seconds. She picked up her phone, switched to the text thread, read it aloud, flat and clear, the same way she read patient charts. Mom, I've been thinking a lot about this and talking it over with Tyler and his family. I think it's best if you don't attend the ceremony. Your presence would create an awkward dynamic we're not equipped to manage on the day. Please don't take this personally. Tyler's family sends their regards. Silence. I worked 3 jobs for 20 years, Brooke. I set aside money every month for 7 years. I did all of that because I love you and because you are the best thing I have ever done in my life, and I wanted you to have the wedding you drew in your diary when you were 11 years old. Mom, I am not going to pay $50,000 to be told I'll ruin the aesthetic. I'm not going to fund a wedding where my name has been removed from the program and I've been seated at table 12 with people nobody knows what to do with. A sharp intake of breath. How do you know about the, it doesn't matter how I know. What matters is that I know. And you knew. And you let it happen. The silence this time was different, heavier. I'm not screaming at you, Dorothy said quietly. I'm not calling you names. I'm not dragging Tyler or his mother. I'm just telling you, I love you, and I will not be made small by people who needed my money and not my presence. Those are two different things, and I deserve better than being treated like one when I am the other. Mom, please, don't call me until you're ready to talk. Not until Patricia tells you what to say. Not until Tyler calms down. Until you, Brooke Sullivan, my daughter, the girl who couldn't make Saturn's rings, are ready to have a real conversation. She hung up. She sat on the edge of the bed in the quiet house for a long time. Then she picked up the laundry and finished folding it, because the laundry still needed folding, and Dorothy Sullivan had never in her life left something half done. The apartment Dorothy rented for 2 weeks was on a narrow street in the Triana neighborhood, 3 floors up, with a balcony just wide enough for 1 chair and a cup of coffee. The walls were whitewashed. The floor was terracotta tile, cool underfoot in the mornings. From the balcony, she could see a sliver of the Guadalquivir River between the buildings, a thin line of moving silver that changed color depending on the time of day. She sat on that balcony every morning at 6 a.m. with her coffee and did something she had not done in a very long time. Nothing. Not productive. Nothing. Not the kind of nothing that is secretly a list being composed in your head. Actual nothing. Watching the light change on the buildings across the street. Listening to the city warm up around her. Letting her mind go wherever it wanted without redirecting it toward usefulness. It was harder than she expected. Her hands kept reaching for her phone to check things that didn't need checking. Her brain kept generating tasks, obligations, the low-frequency hum of someone might need something from you. She had been available for so long that unavailability felt like a symptom of something wrong rather than a choice she had made deliberately and deserved entirely. On the 3rd morning, she sat on that balcony for 45 minutes without picking up her phone once. She counted it as a victory. The flamenco school was on a cobblestoned street off the Plaza de la Alfalfa, in a building that smelled like wood polish and decades of effort. The instructor was a compact, sharp-eyed woman in her 50s named Marisol, who had 0 patience for self-consciousness and absolute patience for genuine struggle. On the first day, Dorothy stood in a line with 7 other students. 3 Americans, 2 Germans, a Japanese woman who turned out to be a professional dancer on holiday, and a retired British schoolteacher named Margaret, who was aggressively cheerful about being terrible. Marisol walked the line slowly, assessing. She stopped in front of Dorothy. You have tension in your shoulders like you're waiting for bad news. I got the bad news already, Dorothy said. About 2 weeks ago. Marisol looked at her for a moment. Then she almost smiled. Good. Then you have nothing left to protect. This will help. She was not wrong. Dorothy's feet, which had spent 30 years in nursing clogs and understood efficiency but not expression, did not immediately grasp what was being asked of them. The first 3 days were a study in humility. Her arms didn't know where to go. Her hips had opinions that conflicted with the music. She caught her own reflection in the studio mirror on the 2nd afternoon and almost laughed. A 58-year-old woman from Scranton, Pennsylvania, standing in a flamenco studio in Spain, trying to remember how to take up space on purpose. But by the end of the first week, something began to shift, Marisol said, not kindly but accurately. You are starting to stop apologizing with your body. Dorothy went back to the apartment that evening and stood on the balcony and looked at the river going silver in the last of the evening light and thought, I can't remember the last time I wasn't apologizing for something. It was the 7th day. Dorothy had just come back from an evening walk along the river, feet pleasantly sore from 2 hours of footwork drills, hair still damp from the shower, eating a plate of cheese and bread she'd bought from a market stall on the way back. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Pennsylvania area code. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Some instinct left over from 30 years of answering calls that came at inconvenient hours with news that couldn't wait. Dorothy. This is Gerald Hargrove. She set down the bread. Gerald. He stopped, started again. I've been trying to figure out how to make this call for about 10 days. I probably owe you a better speech than I've got, but I figured a bad call was better than no call. I'm listening, she said. What Patricia did was wrong. His voice had the quality of a man reading from something he'd written down, not because he didn't mean it, but because he needed the words to stay in the right order. The way she treated you, the campaign she ran on Brooke, removing you from the program, the seating arrangement, all of it. It was wrong and cruel, and she knew exactly what she was doing, and a breath. I knew it was happening. I didn't stop it. I want you to know that I understand that makes me as responsible as she is. Dorothy was quiet for a moment. Outside her window, Sevilla was doing its evening thing. Voices in the street below, someone's television, the distant sound of a guitar. Gerald, can I ask you something honestly? Yeah, please. Why are you calling me instead of talking to Brooke directly? Or Tyler? The silence was long enough that she thought the call might have dropped. Because I've been not talking directly to people for 31 years, he finally said. Patricia runs the room. She always has. I told myself it was easier. It kept the peace. She was usually right about the practical things, so I let her be right about everything. And then I watched her spend 3 years taking apart your relationship with your daughter like it was a project. And I just stood there. Why didn't you say something? Because I'm a coward, Dorothy. A comfortable, well-dressed coward who convinced himself that silence was neutrality. A pause. It isn't. Dorothy thought about Frank. About a man who wrote "loves lavender" on a notepad so he wouldn't forget to do something kind. About the difference between a man like that and a man like Gerald Hargrove. Not a difference in basic decency, but in courage. In the willingness to be inconvenient for the sake of someone else's dignity. Thank you for calling, Gerald. I hope Brooke finds her way back to you, he said. She talks about you, the real you, not the version Patricia built. She talks about you like you hung the moon. She just forgot that for a while. People forget things, Dorothy said. Sometimes they remember again. After she hung up, she sat for a while. Then she went back to the balcony and looked at the river going silver in the last of the evening light. I know, Frank, she thought. I know. Ashley Tanner texted Dorothy on October 14th at 2:17 in the afternoon. Ms. Sullivan, I need you to know. The centerpieces are plastic flowers, like craft store plastic, dollar bin plastic. There's no string quartet. The room smells like the corporate conferences that happened in it all week. Brooke looked at herself in the mirror an hour ago and said, I wanted lavender, and then didn't say anything else for like 5 minutes. I don't know if this helps or hurts to hear. I just thought you should know that she knows. Dorothy read the message sitting in a cafe near the Plaza de España, a glass of tinto de verano going warm in the afternoon heat. Around her, tourists took photographs of each other in front of the fountains. A kid chased a pigeon. 2 old men played chess at a stone table with the focused serenity of people who had long since decided that chess was the correct use of an afternoon. She typed back, It helps. Thank you for being there with her. She put the phone down and finished her drink. 3 days after the wedding, Ashley called. Not texted. Called. Which told Dorothy immediately that this was not a text kind of thing. Ms. Sullivan, I need to tell you something and I feel sick about it, but you need to know, and more importantly, Brooke needs to know, but I don't know how to tell her, and I thought maybe if you knew first, you could— Ashley, slow down. What happened? A breath. At the reception, it was at this hotel, kind of a generic ballroom, honestly pretty depressing. Tyler left his phone on the arm of a chair when he went to do the cake thing. I was sitting right there. The screen lit up with a notification. I wasn't trying to look, I swear, it was right there. Okay. It was a text from someone named Vivian Caldwell. She works with Tyler. I've met her once at a company thing. The text said, Ashley's voice went careful, the way you're careful with something that could break. It said, thinking about you today. Can't wait for things to be different. And Tyler had already replied. He replied while he was supposed to be cutting the cake. It said, Viv, I did it. It's done. Give it 6 months. We talked about this. Dorothy set down her coffee cup. Give it 6 months, she repeated. Yeah. The full architecture of it assembled itself in Dorothy's mind in the space of about 4 seconds. Tyler Hargrove, who had never been told no by his mother, and had therefore never developed a self that held up under resistance, had married Brooke Sullivan with an exit plan already drafted, had said I do with a timeline in his pocket. had stood in a room decorated with craft store plastic flowers in a hotel that Dorothy's $50,000 would have rescued, and had texted his girlfriend before the cake was cut. "Does Brooke know?" Dorothy asked. "No, not yet. I've been sitting on this for 3 days and I feel like I'm going to lose my mind." Ashley: "Yeah. You need to tell her. Today, in person. Show her the screenshot if you took one." "I took one." "Good. Go to where she is and sit down with her and show her." A pause. "And when she needs somewhere to go afterward, make sure she knows her mother's number still works." She called 4 days later. Dorothy was in the middle of her final flamenco class. Marisol had just demonstrated a turn sequence that Dorothy had been failing at for a week. Something about the way the weight transferred, the way the arms had to commit before the feet did. A principle that Marisol explained as, "You cannot be halfway in flamenco. You go fully or you fall." Dorothy's phone buzzed in her jacket pocket across the room. She saw the name on the screen from where she stood. She excused herself. She walked out to the front step of the school. She sat down on the worn stone and picked up. "Mom," one word. But Dorothy knew every version of Brooke's voice. The Sunday morning voice, the excited voice, the exhausted voice, the voice she'd used at 11 when Saturn's rings wouldn't cooperate. This was the voice from the night Frank died. The voice that meant, "I have been trying to hold this together and I can't anymore. I'm here, baby." And then Brooke cried. Not polite crying, real crying. The ugly, effortful kind that sounds like someone finally putting down something very heavy after carrying it for way too long. Dorothy sat on the stone step outside the flamenco school and let her daughter cry without trying to fix it or redirect it or make it more comfortable. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is just stay on the line. When it began to slow, Brooke said, "I don't even know where to start." "You don't have to start anywhere specific." "I said you'd ruin the aesthetic, Mom. Her voice broke again. "I let her get so far into my head that I looked at my own mother and I thought you were the problem." "How does that even happen?" "It happens carefully," Dorothy said. "By someone patient and deliberate who knew exactly which buttons to push. That's not an excuse, Brooke, but it's an explanation." "I was so embarrassed by you," Brooke said, forcing herself to say it, the way you force yourself to look at a wound to clean it properly. "For things that aren't even... You work hard, you wear scrubs, you talk to people like they're people. None of that is something to be embarrassed by. I was embarrassed because she told me to be, and I went along with it." "Yeah. Why didn't you yell at me?" Would it have helped? A small sound, not quite a laugh, but in that neighborhood. Probably not. "I yelled at you plenty when you were 16, and you never once changed your behavior because of it. You changed when you were ready to change." A pause. "Are you ready?" "Tyler, I know about Tyler." "Ashley told you?" "Ashley told me to be available when you needed someone. She did that right." Brooke went quiet for a moment. "What do I do?" "I don't know yet. That's going to take some time to figure out. But Brooke, you don't figure it out alone, and you don't figure it out by asking Patricia Hargrove what she thinks." "No kidding," Brooke said. Her voice was wrecked, but something in it was also very quietly coming back to itself. "Where are you right now?" Dorothy asked. "Ashley's couch." "Good. Stay there tonight." A pause. "Mom's coming home in 4 days." "Mom," Brooke said, "where even are you right now?" Dorothy looked up at the narrow strip of sky above the Triana street. The October afternoon light was doing something extraordinary to the whitewashed walls across from her. That particular golden hour that Sevilla seemed to generate in abundance, like the city had an agreement with the sun. "I'm sitting outside a flamenco school in Sevilla." Silence. Then, "Are you serious?" "Dead serious." "Mom," and this time there was something in it, something unguarded, the old frequency of them, the one that had nothing to do with venues or aesthetics or whose family had the better address. "That's so you. That is so completely you." "I know," Dorothy said. "I'm starting to remember that." She flew home on a Tuesday morning, which felt appropriate. Tuesdays had been a theme. Linda picked her up from the airport looking like a woman who had been waiting 10 days to say "I told you so" and was exercising heroic restraint. "You look different," Linda said as they pulled out of the pickup lane. "I'm tan." "Not just tan, you look like you sleep now." "I've been sleeping 8 hours." 8, Linda glanced at her. "Dorothy Sullivan, 8 hours. Every night. That's medically significant." They drove for a while. The Pennsylvania October was doing its low-key, spectacular thing, maples going red and orange. The particular quality of morning light that exists only in autumn and only in places that earn their seasons. "How's Brooke?" Linda asked. "She's at Ashley's. She's got a lot to figure out." "And you're okay with that? The not fixing it?" Dorothy considered. "Frank used to say, Dot, you cannot want something for someone harder than they want it for themselves. I used to think that was a little cold. Now I think it's just accurate." Wise man. He really was. Linda was quiet for a moment. Then, "Patricia Hargrove's house is on the market." Dorothy turned to look at her. "You're kidding." "Listed last week. Gerald moved into an apartment in Radnor. Word has it Patricia's staying with her sister in Connecticut." Linda's delivery was studiously neutral. "I'm not saying anything." "You're absolutely saying something. I'm saying that sometimes the walls people build with other people's money don't hold up forever." Dorothy looked back at the road. She thought about a 6-bedroom house in Villanova where a man named Gerald had spent 30 years not saying what needed to be said, and a woman named Patricia had spent those same 30 years constructing an image that required other people's dignity as building material. "No," she agreed quietly. "They don't." She got home at noon. She made coffee. She sat at the kitchen table, the same table where she'd written the check, where she'd done 1,000 nights of bookkeeping, where a 14-year-old girl had once sat surrounded by glitter glue and cardboard and the beginning of Saturn's rings. She opened her laptop. She logged into her banking app. She looked at the account she'd renamed 2 weeks ago, sitting on a Sevilla balcony at 6 in the morning with her first cup of coffee. Dorothy's turn. Current balance, $31,847. The $50,000 was gone. $18,000 in cancellation costs. The rest spread across 2 weeks in Sevilla, a flamenco school that had given her something she didn't have a word for yet, and a pair of proper flamenco shoes she'd bought on the last day because Marisol had said her footwork was finally landing with some authority, and you couldn't do footwork like that in rented shoes. What was left wasn't the dream she'd been saving for. It was something better. It was hers. She thought about what she'd said to Brooke on the stone step outside the school after the crying had slowed and they'd found their way back to something that felt like themselves. "I didn't cancel that wedding to punish you. I canceled it because I was done paying for a room I wasn't allowed to stand in." There's a difference between sacrifice and subsidy. I spent 20 years confusing the two. Brooke had said, "I'm so sorry, Mom." And Dorothy had said, "I know, me too. Now let's figure out what comes next." What came next was unknown. Brooke had real work to do. With a therapist, with herself, with the slow excavation of 3 years of someone else's voice in her head that she'd mistaken for her own. Tyler was a separate story with a separate ending that wasn't Dorothy's to tell. Jake was already texting his sister daily, which was its own kind of medicine, quietly, without making a big deal of it, the way Jake had always done things. And Dorothy Sullivan, nurse, bookkeeper, keeper of memories, maker of medicine soup, student of flamenco, had $31,847 in an account with her name on it, and a passport with 1 new stamp in it, and an absolutely non-negotiable standing reservation with herself on the back porch every evening before dark. No phone, no tasks, nothing to manage. Frank's flannel shirt was still in the closet. The notepad sheet was still in her coat pocket. She was still the keeper of every memory, but she was also, finally, starting to make some new ones. She went out to the back porch that evening, just as the light was going. The garden was done for the season, everything dried and drawn back, the way things go quiet before they come back. The lavender along the back fence had gone silver and woody, but she could still smell it faintly in the cooling air. She sat in the rocking chair, the one she'd put on the porch the year after Frank died, because her mother Eileen had always said the porch was non-negotiable, and she sat there without a phone, and without a list, and without anyone needing anything from her. Just Dorothy Sullivan, in her own garden, on her own porch, at the end of a day that was entirely, finally, hers. She stayed until it was dark. She spent it on the only thing it was ever really worth buying, herself.